President Trump has signed a National Defense Authorization Act approving one of the largest increases in funding for our military since President Reagan. Some major benefits of this act include increasing the size of our force and approving a 2.4% pay raise for our troops. That's the largest in 8 years. Here now to discuss, Frank Gaffney, Center for Security Policy President and former Assistant Secretary of Defense, along with retired Marine Corps Gunnery Sergeant Jessie Duff, who's currently a London Center Policy Research Fellow. Frank, let me start with you. The biggest pay increase since 2010, 20,000 additional troops. They cut the so-called widow's tax, a $700 billion deal. We know that our defense has been in deterioration for a long time. Can this sort of jumpstart a revival or a turnaround?
I don't know if jumpstart is the right term. I think start us in the right direction, Charles, is more accurate. I think it's a significant down payment on what needs to be done, but we shouldn't be under any illusion. We've had the better part of 3 decades worth of, at best, benign neglect, and in the case of the Obama years, I think it was really a wrecking operation against our military. And you put on top of that the effects of a continuing effort to impose budget caps that will tie our defense spending to domestic spending, a completely arbitrary and I think reckless policy approach by the Congress, specifically the Democrats, but they're getting some help from some Republicans as well. And you've got a formula for our military remaining unready. The Heritage Foundation just recently has done a terrific study of this called the Index of U.S. Military Strength. They've rated all 4 of our services as either marginal or weak, right, in light of what's happened to them in terms of modernization as well as readiness and training. This is a nightmare, and it needs to be fixed.
Well, Jessie, we know a key component of all of this is the esprit de corps, if you will, which was certainly in a nosedive under President Obama. We didn't really have direction with those Middle Eastern wars. We saw the budgets being cut time after time, and also just a narrative about our military in general was not a positive one. So at least in that case, I think this should go a long way.
This is awesome news to our military. Between 2011 and 2015, our Pentagon was slashed by $100 billion. It turned out that the enemy wasn't a foreign army, but our own Budget Control Act. With that, we should have 36 capable battalions in the Marines. We only have 23. We should have 50 combat brigade teams in the Army, and we only have 32. With that said, we're not capable, like Frank had indicated, we're marginally capable. And get this, the Marines and the Army were rated as weak. We cannot go and fight a war on 2 fronts. That devastates American interests. And with this, it's going to take time to rebuild. But at least we're jump-starting it. We need to get Congress to back this.
How do we do that, Frank? I mean, do we use the success that we've had recently against ISIS and some of the other organizations? Because, to your point, there's a lot of resistance in Washington, D.C., about approving this sort of money that's needed.
I think part of it has to be, Charles, that we say to the folks in Congress, look, there are men and women who will needlessly lose their lives if, God forbid, we go up against an adversary more formidable than the Islamic State, which is, let's face it, an overgrown terrorist organization. This is a time when I think what a friend of mine, Donald Rumsfeld, used to say, weakness is provocative. We're up against now peer competitors in Russia and China, notably. Even the Iranians and North Koreans are posing increasingly formidable threats. Congress is on notice that they will be responsible for the deaths of, needless deaths of our servicemen and possibly a lot of others of us if this is not remedied right quick.
Well, thank you both very much for your expertise. Next, economic momentum getting stronger.